The common stereotype about spiritual culture is that the spiritual person is always smiling and like happy Buddha. Consciousness can feel the full spectral range of emotions. Happiness, pleasure, joy, ecstasy, love, affection. But then we have to also acknowledge it also allows me to feel sad or unhappy, pain, suffering.
На бэкграунде, да, я всегда идет обсчет каких-то грустных историй. Вернее, даже не грустных, а правдивых для меня самого.
Но почему правдивые истории должны обязательно висеть гирями на сердце?
Они не висят гирями, абсолютно нет. У нас все стоит на голове, то есть как-то все наоборот. То, что, казалось бы, должно вообще никому не нравиться и находиться в полном забвении, плавает наверху. А все, что имеет какую-то ценность, не нужно никому. Я уверен, что то, что происходит внутри меня, намного важнее для меня самого, чем то, что происходит снаружи.
Those moments when the gears of the heart really change. Past, present and future are happening now.
Do you want to just tell me the story?
I mean, I don't really know because I can't imagine how you navigate such a thing. I just can't even fathom it. It doesn't even, I don't think it even makes you gives you any insight really into it because there's a step with it you can't go. It's shocking. It's terrible. You
Well,
just think
basically
this
what I
is
want-
not what I.
what I want you to-
To
what
be
I-
honest, look, I find this really hard to sort of discuss it like this, and yet it feels like this is something that's got to come up, you know.
Yeah.
Where it's hard to strike a balance, you know.
So I wrote stories and they seem to hold everything together in a particular part of my life or a long part of my life where things needed to be held together. But I don't believe in the narrative anymore. I don't actually believe that that's what life is like and that there's a pleasing resolve and all of that sort of thing to life. I just feel that to do a fractured narrative, a thing where time is actually compressed, events are stuck on top of other events, there's no particular logic to it, or a distressing kind of logic, makes that it's much more real and true to the way I feel about things. And I think it's the nature of songs to have an insight into things that we don't consciously have because largely they come from the unconscious, which is a kind of reservoir of knowledge and understanding that's far beyond what we consciously are aware of.
And also the kind of fact that the stuff doesn't just come in on the one where you feel it comes in somewhere, but there's some more space for the kind of backing thing to kind of come through.
And isn't it the invisible things that have so much mass and so much weight? All right. And are as big as the universe.
Do you feel that a lack of narrative allows you to get to something as a way to kind of
I just
explain
don't think.
the world to
I
yourself?
don't think life is a story.
Yeah.
You know, that has it. I mean, we all hope it is.
Yeah.
We
It
all,
kind of is, I have to say. It kind of is a story. It's the same story for everyone, in a way.
in a way, but the arc can be very different. It just requires more effort.
Most of us don't want to change. What we do want is sort of modifications on the original model. We keep on being ourselves, but just hopefully better versions of ourselves. But what happens when an event occurs that is so catastrophic that you just change from one day to the next? You change from the known person to an unknown person. So that when you look at yourself in the mirror, you recognize the person that you were, but the person inside the skin is a different person. So that when you go outside, the world is the same, but now you are a different person and you have to renegotiate your position in the world. There's no such thing as accident.
Yeah, I think accidents is the wrong word because it's more that we just get into that we get ourselves into a space these days where some sort of magical thing happens that isn't to do with which isn't to do with knowing. Which isn't to do with knowing at all, actually. So, I mean, there are happy accidents and stuff like that, where a lot of very beautiful things just happen after each other, and then we get into a situation where that doesn't happen at all, and we're kind of forever foraging away for these moments. You know, we all wish we have something to write about. You know, we all wish we have something in our lives that can happen, that we can to write about and make our writing interesting and all of that sort of stuff. The imagination needs room to move. It needs room to invent and to dream. And when a trauma happens that's that big, there's no room. There's just no imaginative room around it. There's just the fucking trauma. Yeah, things are being torn apart, and I'm desperately trying to find a way of making some kind of narrative sense out of it, if we're talking about songwriting, or at least some sense out of it where I can do what it keeps saying in the books, or people keep saying to me that it's that I can reduce this chaotic mess that's happened down into something that's more, that I can reduce it, distill it down into like a platitude that I can fit nicely, a kind of greeting card sized platitude that means something to me, like he lives in my heart or something like that. People say it all the time to me. He lives in my heart, and I go, yeah, no, I know, yeah, right. But he doesn't, He doesn't? It's affected me in a way that I don't understand, so that my reactions to things aren't the same as they used to. They used to be able to predict what would I would feel at certain times, and now I just don't have any handle on things anymore.
What's that like?
Well, it's frightening because, like, I don't know what I'm fucking doing now, for example. What am I sitting in a camera, being filmed, talking about this sort of thing for? I wouldn't have dreamed of doing that before. There's no. You know, I can put it in different ways and make it sound nice and stuff like that. What happened and use kind of to tie it up in language and stuff like that. But actually, every time I try and articulate it, it just does him a disservice. That's how it feels like to me. Everything is not okay, but it's also okay. And in that respect, things continue. That's what I mean. You know, all of this stuff that I'm saying now, it feels like it's just a lot of bullshit to me. You know, it may mean something, but in the end, there's something that happened, and there's a kind of like a ring around that event, or it's fenced off, and everything else is okay around it, but there's just something that happened in that short space of time that we can never get that far away from, that we're
You probably don't want to.
well, I think, you know, when I looked at the film back, there was something I was rattling on about time being elastic. And I think that's what I meant, that we're attached to this event and that we move away like that and we're like on a rubber band and life can go on and on and on and on, but eventually it just keeps coming back to that thing.
That's on an external level. But what is pointing at, to endure suffering, now we're talking about the heart. Who is capable of suffering greater pain in the heart is more exalted. Now we're leaving the plane of rational thought. Aprakrita vastu avan manasagochara. Spiritual conception leaves the plane of rationality. It's going to contradict what we think we know, what we think we understand, what we think is happiness.
Это ужасно сложно. Но при этом привлекательно. Ты постоянно находишься в какой-то дежавю, тебе кажется, что ты здесь был еще раз. И ты не понимаешь, что с тобой происходит, что происходит в твоем сознании. Ты идешь на очень опасные края в твоем сознании, потом вернешься в какое-то странное успокоение. Причем там в какой-то момент начинается какой-то момент откровения, где ты думаешь, что начинаешь уже понимать других языков. Это ощущение, что идешь именно в центр трагедии, и ты начинаешь уже слушать. Это внутренний голос, оживляется этот голос. Вот это ощущение, это богатство, которое есть внутри нас, и оно изолировано в этих эстетических законах. Внутренняя драматургия, которая не открыта с первым взглядом, что происходит, тогда вы поймете, что мы вообще ничего не слышали до этого. До этого тоже слышали, но ваше сознание не открывало эту взаимосвязь до этого. То есть, представляете, вот это делать перевод языка ангелов, не знаю, на наш жаргон. Это невозможно. Мы должны учить услышать этот язык. Мне кажется, поэзия имеет такой еще более мудрый способ. Словами, которые употребляем каждый день, они становятся иными, когда находятся внутри в сочетании стихотворения. Открываются какие-то совершенно другие пространства, понимания, где это слово не означает то, что оно означает каждый день, а он становится проводник в какого-то другого уровня представления в который мы входим в этом. И трагизм после какой-то определенный заряд мощности и температура и электричества совершается такое потрясающее явление. Исчезает эстетика и морализм. Исчезает этос. То есть человек становится свободным. Нету добро, зло, нету... Это все мешается в одно. Что человек освобождается от понятия уравновешенного человека, который это морализм, этика, эстетика. Как политические животные, которые говорит Аристотель, мы работаем с этих основы. Но в этот момент, когда ток поднимается в таком температуре, мы начинаем уже, и все значения, которые у нас есть, они становятся чужие, родные. Начинается совершенно какой-то другой спектакль взаимодействия этих значений. Это не просто дать резолюция на того, что хотим сказать. Определять этот сюжет так, чтобы в моралистическом точке зрения, которой мы говорим, вот это было хорошо, это плохо, а вы посмотрите, а вы хороший или плохой. Поэтому поднимается температура так сильно в трагедии, что сгоряют все бактерии морализма и эстетики, и все это вирусы, которые, в принципе, нас составляют в темницу, изоляция от внутренней сердечной свободы. Это сердце, которое открывает такое огромное пространство неба и пропасть, то есть увеличивает диапазон нашего понимания.
Ironically, when the heart is experiencing separation, the pain of separation, it reaches a greater depth and yields a superior spiritual substance than it does in the happy times of meeting. So they have a saying that says, absence makes the heart grow fonder. So the test is not when the lovers are together. That's never the test, is when you're together. The test of love is when you're apart. That's when we will find out what degree of love is there, when there's separation. Not when happy times and joyous union, but when we're separated, then we'll see. And how much what suffering one is willing to endure, and how much sacrifice one is willing to make in love, in separation from the beloved. All suffering is due to separation from Krishna. All suffering. Whether it's the suffering of the conditioned souls or the anguish of separation experienced in the hearts of the Braja Gopis. The cause of all suffering is separation from Krishna. Yashoda is suffering in separation from Krishna. Braja Gopis are suffering in separation. Pandavas are suffering. There's so much suffering in these different pastimes. That means then we can't carry a stereotype of what is happiness into the spiritual domain. The agony of separation from Krishna is a liberating type suffering. If this is about achieving the greatest depths of heart and magnitude of heart and intensity, that in separation a greater depth and magnitude and intensity of heart is achieved than in union. And Gurudev said, even the animals know about union. He said, goats, they understand something about union. He said, but who understands the peculiar joy of separation? Not the animals, certainly. Guru Maharaj liked to quote the poet Shelley. He said, our sweetest songs are those that tell the saddest tales. Heartbreaking love songs. Heartbreaking love stories. Because it's another type of joy. deeper than the smiley kind. How to go on in the absence of Krishna. And interestingly, this is the very, very high subject matter of the depths of separation expressed there in the conclusion of Shikshastakam, the conclusion of Chaitanya Charitamrita, very, very high and deep things. But miraculously, mysteriously, it's also relevant to those in the aspiring position. Adarshan, how to pursue Krishna consciousness in the apparent absence of Krishna, in the apparent absence of Krishna consciousness. It's the critical point. This is the mystery of Krishna consciousness. It's the mystery of the pastimes of Krishna. It's the mystery of Krishna culture, is that the greatest substance of Krishna consciousness will be mind and separation. When someone's before you, you see them, they're not so much in your heart and mind. Right? You're looking at their form, seeing, but in their absence, they're fully present in your heart and mind. And what Srila Guru Maharaj coined, the original phrase, union and separation. In separation, there can also be union. If what makes Krishna happy, breaking my heart, then that's my happiness. So how will we understand what is spiritual? Kaviraj Goswami says, Bahye bichajala hoy, bitore anandamoy, Krishna premar adbhuta charit. The adbhuta charit, or astonishingly wonderful characteristic of Krishna prem, is that externally it appears like one is suffering like anything, while internally they're relishing some sort of ecstatic joy. People say, well, these are very high things. Oh, yeah, right. The very high thing is called Krishna consciousness. It's a very high thing. It's the most high thing. It's the greatest type of happiness.